Welcome to Current Affairs. My name is Nathan Robinson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Current Affairs magazine. We are joined today by Congresswoman Grace Meng. She represents the 6th District of New York in the United States Congress, and she recently reintroduced her legislation, the Menstrual Equity for All Act, which we are here to talk to her today about. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us on Current Affairs.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start by, if I could just ask you to familiarize our listeners and readers with the problem to which this legislation that you have designed and introduced is an intended solution.
Sure. Well, this is definitely not a new problem, but I think in recent years it has garnered more attention. And to be honest, growing up, I never thought about this as an issue. I was always able to afford my period products. A 7th grader in my district in Queens, New York, actually wrote a letter to me one day and said that people in homeless shelters were not able to get pads and tampons because of the way that the federal grants were structured. And so that's how I learned about this problem. And as I delved more into it, I realized that this wasn't just a problem affecting people, in underdeveloped countries, but that many girls, for example, in schools right here in America, skip school every month when they get their period because they can't afford these products. And so that's how I started working on this issue.
You wrote in 2021, you co-authored an article in Ms. Magazine explaining some of the problem. And you really cite some just extraordinary and disturbing facts about the reality of what is called period poverty in the United States. Women choosing between buying food and spending money on menstrual products. You talked there about the homeless people improvising with, you say, rags, paper bags, and newspapers. You describe it as one of America's alarming and often hidden inequities.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, periods in general have very much been a taboo topic in our society. You can ask, any person who gets their period. We all share the experience of, hiding the product in our sleeves, making sure no one around us knows that we are at that time of the month, even though it's a natural part of our bodily functions. And so we just really haven't talked about this enough. I'm pretty sure that some of my colleagues have signed on to my bill because they wanted me to stop talking about periods on the floor of the House. And so a huge part of this is to increase public awareness and public education. This is not a luxury product. It is a medical necessity. And so some of what we've worked on just makes sure that people have what they need.
It is strange, isn't it, how the issue is often discussed with a kind of nervousness or embarrassment or discomfort. In fact, the president first told me about your piece of legislation, sort of said so with a little kind of nervous laugh almost. Like, it's very odd. And of course, that taboo that you mentioned prevents us from, being able to lay out these really, really disturbing facts that you cite in the Ms. Magazine article.
Yeah, definitely. We want to remind people that this is a normal part of our bodily functions. And just like how bathrooms provide free paper towels, toilet paper, hand soap, we want them to provide these products as well. So people who need them don't have to go through embarrassing moments or, worst case, like skip school or skip work and have missed economic opportunities.
I want to get to the piece of legislation and how you designed it to respond to the problem. But first, I just want to mention one other injustice that you documented in that article, which is the situation facing people who are incarcerated or in immigration detention.
Yeah, we have heard stories. My bill obviously only addresses federal facilities, but we've heard cases from local to national facilities where people have to ration their pads they have to share them or they have to kind of barter for them, like depending how their commissary funds are funded, they may have to barter food or a phone call from their loved ones during that time of the month so that they can get enough money or resources to get a pad or two. And so this is something that's truly embarrassing and humiliating, and no one, including people detained in a facility, should have to endure that.
So let's talk about the legislation. I mean, you have described the situation in a number of different contexts, everything from, young girls in schools to people in homeless shelters to people in detention facilities. So obviously in designing a piece of legislation, you've had to think, well, how do we guarantee access in all of these different places governed by all of these different authorities? So perhaps you could talk about, kind of the basics of how your legislation tries to be comprehensive here.
Sure. And this is really a product of so many different organizations, anyone from advocates for menstrual equity to the companies that literally manufacture and produce and sell these products. It's trying to be a whole of government approach to be able to help everyone, regardless of where you fall in terms of your income level. And it hopefully will help millions of people. And we want people, whether they are homeless, whether they are in a federal facility or a public federal building, or in schools or in a large company, to be able to have these products. And so we've tried to touch upon everyone.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the components of this legislation? What would change if this were passed into law?
Sure. Well, we want, for example, states to have the ability to use their federal funds that they may receive to provide kids who may need these products in schools. We want Medicaid, people who are lower income, to be able to get these products. And again, to make sure that federal buildings, including the place where I work, we were able to do that, just administratively, but we want federal buildings to be able to provide these products as well. And higher education institutions, many of whom are actually doing it on their own. Whenever I visit a different college, for whatever reason, I do see that more and more institutions and more companies are actually doing this on their own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I assume that oftentimes this is colleges that are, prosperous, companies that are prosperous, and your legislation, aims to make sure that it is called the Menstrual Equity for All Act. It is not just you have the good fortune to work at an employer that actually takes this stuff seriously. I mean, you are talking about our most, targeting it so that it covers and reaches our most marginalized and vulnerable populations.
Exactly. You say it very eloquently. We don't want to leave anyone out. We don't want anyone to feel any sort of shame about this very natural biological process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you then, you recently reintroduced this piece of legislation. We wanted to become law. What would that take? Where are we in the process? What do you need in order to get us from a piece of legislation that we've designed carefully to nothing can entirely solve a problem, but it has enough requirements and guarantees to where it looks like it would make significant progress? How do we get this into law, Congresswoman?
Well, stories like this are incredibly helpful. I can tell you, when I'm talking about this issue, most people, men or women, do not necessarily prioritize this issue, and many are even surprised to learn about it. This is not the first year I've introduced the bill, but every year we've made a little more progress. We've been spending so much time tweaking the bill, trying to get as many people as we can on board. There has been some sort of bipartisan support in the past as well. So we have more co-sponsors than ever. I think the first time I introduced it, we had less than a handful of co-sponsors. And so I'm really heartened at the progress, and hopefully we can get this across the finish line sooner than later.
Members of the public who hear you discuss this, who think about this, and who read the material that you have put out and go, oh, yes, this is a problem, or who face this problem in their own lives and think, what do we as individual members of a democratic republic do to help push this legislation forward? How would you answer them?
Oh, great question. And that is so crucial right now because of the lack of public awareness. In a perfect world, we would want everyone to contact their Congress member, Republicans and Democrats, and ask them to sign on to this bill. I'll tell you, this is not Democratic issue only. Obviously, people in both parties get periods. And we've had Republican young people and Democratic young people reach out wanting to work on the bill, wanting to work on this issue. And a lot of people are asking their member of Congress to co-sponsor the bill. And I've had colleagues who have not thought about this issue say to me that someone in their district approached them on the bill, on the issue, and that's how they got involved. And so that public awareness and, asking their member to sign on is so important.
And this seems like one of those issues where a number of seemingly small changes could make a very big difference. Like, it's a serious problem, but it's not. I mean, it's one of those things where you think, well, how hard should it be to get? I mean, these are not expensive products to provide. This is something that it should be within the realm, you'd think, and very wealthy country of solving this problem.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, some of the steps that we've taken in a bipartisan way in the last few years, for example, allowing federal grants that homeless shelter providers receive to purchase and distribute these products. So that's been very helpful for homeless shelters. And also being able to have these products purchased with people who may have the flexible or health saving accounts through their employer. So if you look at the website or the list of items that people with a flexible health spending account can purchase, and these are crutches, Band-Aids, contact lenses. It did not include pads and tampons before, but as of, I think, 2 years ago, we were able to work in Congress to change that law, and now people can buy period products.
I just want to conclude here by situating this within the broader fight for justice in healthcare. In addition to introducing this piece of legislation yourself, in May, you also signed on to Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All Act of 2023. So, obviously, health justice is the period poverty is a very, very serious health justice issue. But we have many health justice issues as well in this country. So perhaps you could just talk a little bit about that and the broader ongoing fight for health justice in this country.
Definitely. Look, America is one of the greatest and wealthiest countries in this globe. And there is no reason why people, regardless of their income level, should be sacrificing healthcare or not able to get the healthcare access and needs taken care of. We just saw under President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, literally life-changing legislation that we worked with them on to lower the cost of prescription drugs, to lower the cost of insulin for senior citizens. And this is something that the public, both Republicans and Democrats, have been asking for. It's an issue that polls well. Now, why does it poll well? Because healthcare access, the justice of having access to equitable healthcare, regardless of how rich you are, in a country where their corporate leaders are doing very well, healthcare is a human right. It should not be a privilege in this country.
Mm-hmm. Well, Congresswoman Grace Meng, we really appreciate you joining us here on Current Affairs today. If people want to read the text of the legislation, they can go to your website, meng.house.gov, and click on legislation. You can read the full text there and also see press releases you have put out on this. And I also recommend the Ms. Magazine article mentioned earlier, which we will link. So thank you very much, Congresswoman, for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
The Current Affairs Podcast is a product of Current Affairs Magazine. If you are not subscribed to Current Affairs Magazine, visit currentaffairs.org/subscribe today and get our glorious print edition. The Current Affairs Podcast is released regularly every week on patreon.com/currentaffairs. Thanks for listening.